people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. You may have heard the rumors were true. Carolyn officially migrated from boxer over to MVP, and she already has an opponent lined up, set to make her MVP debut on the undercard of Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua in defense of her WBC lightweight title against Italy's own Camilla Panatta. I expect Carolyn to win. Camilla's a solid little fighter, been around the block, but she's got 2 losses and 1 draw already, whereas Carolyn sports a professional record of 11 wins with no losses and 1 draw, 5 knockouts. This fight will be Carolyn Dubois' second fight of this year, and the same applies for Camilla. She saw action earlier this year also, so neither fighter has any ring rust that they need to shake off. I think it's important to note that Camilla has spent most of her time toggling in between featherweight and super featherweight, so she's going to be moving up in weight for this fight. Those things in mind, it won't be surprising to anyone if Carolyn turns out overpowering Camilla, who only has 1 recorded knockout. She's not a heavy-handed fighter. She's not a knockout merchant. The real story here isn't the fight itself so much as the signing, MVP's signing of Carolyn Dubois. Now, they've spent a good portion of this year cultivating female talent and signing every top female fighter they can get their hands on, so that in the coming year, there are expectations. I've already seen some people saying it. When are they going to start making the big matches, the interesting matches between these female fighters, since they've already signed so many of them? In MVP's defense, they've already put a good number of these girls to work, to good use. Not just on Jake's undercards, but also in their MVP Prospect series. They do several of those smaller shows throughout the calendar year, and we've already seen some of their female talent on those cards. For this one, Joshua versus Jake, they have a good number of their Valkyries fighting on that undercard. Now, Carolyn Dubois is one among them. So with the signing, 3 of the 4 major titles are on their side of the street. They have Terry Harper, they have Stephanie Hahn, now they also have Carolyn Dubois, not to mention Holly Holm, who is also competing at that same weight, and don't forget Alicia Baumgartner, who's going to be boxing on the same show as Carolyn and has already had words with Carolyn in the past. There's been a rivalry brewing there on the premise that Alicia has beef with Clarissa Shields, who just so happens to be Carolyn's mentor, Carolyn's idol, who Carolyn wants to model herself after, wants to be most like, so you can see the dichotomy. Now that both Carolyn and Alicia are on the same side of the street, that is a major fight that you can put Alicia Baumgartner in for what is Carolyn's WBC lightweight title. I don't imagine that after the upcoming fight she's about to have, she'll stay at super feather much longer. She will move up. And there's no reason that MVP shouldn't be able to put that fight together and several others in the coming calendar year. They don't have to deal with any promotional politics, any network politics. They have the means, the money, the fight dates, and the bodies. So next year should be an even bigger year for their women's stable. With each signing, the expectation grows that there's no major fight involving the women that MVP shouldn't be able to make because they've picked up so many of them. It's not just signing those fighters, it's promoting them. It's building those shows, those brands. So there's that to consider. Another boxer fighter out the door. Lawrence Okoli, Joshua Buatsi, more recently Ben Whitaker, now Carolyn Dubois. I always felt that in promoting the female fighters they had, the way that they did, they were just trying to replicate what Matchroom had on Sky, since Matchroom are really the ones who got the ball rolling for that, and Boxer was just trying to operate in their stead. in their shadow. But at this point, they can no longer afford to pretend to be Matchroom. At this point, it's about survival. So I wouldn't be at all surprised to see both Lauren Price and her ex-girlfriend, Karis Artingstall, walk through the door, the same way that Carolyn Dubois just did, because boxers got their own problems, and they may not be the best place for a female fighter right now.
We got to keep it optimistic, guys. You know, prior to 2025, the Lamont Roach's profile have such a big profile in the sport of boxing. You know, he was always a solid perennial contender, but in 2025, I think Lamont Roach raised his stock a lot. If you invested in a Lamont Roach stock in 2025, I think you cashed in pretty well, you know, and I think 2026 looks like it's on the up and up. Regardless of the two draws, there were two big fights. They were both controversial. He got a lot of praise for both performances, especially the Davis fight, which I absolutely thought he won. But even in the Pitbull Cruz fight, which I think, you know, there's an argument for both guys to have won the fight. He closed strong, having broken his hand. I think there's an argument to make a rematch because you can say, wow, well, he did that with a broken hand. Imagine if he had both hands, you know, how much more control he would have had of the fight. And of course, Pitbull arguing about the point deduction, which I think is ludicrous because he should have lost points for several other fouls, even if he maybe shouldn't have lost it for that one. Either way, I think it's a solid setup for a rematch and a solid setup for the stock of Lamont Roach to keep rising.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. In spite of the two consecutive draws, overall, it's been a successful year for Lamont Roach. Those two draws did more for his career than any prior victory that he had, decisive or otherwise. It sets him up real nice for the coming calendar year for what could be even bigger fights for bigger money. And he's in a good place. I would say that he is. The draws don't hurt his stock. I mean, to a lot of people, the Gervonta Davis fight wasn't a draw at all. That's a fight that he legitimately won, where this past weekend's fight might have been a draw. It was a tale of two halves, with Isaac dominating the first half and Roach rallying back in the second. So overall, it's been a productive year, and it's been a good year, but I maintain my original position that I don't think Lamont Roach should do further business with the PBC. You're giving those guys too many opportunities to fuck you over. He's not their fighter. Of course, after the fight, there was immediate talk of an immediate rematch, that they might run it back in the coming calendar year. But for Lamont Roach, what is it really worth? An interim title? WBC interim title that Isaac Cruz still holds? For that, maybe you want to challenge the winner of Stevenson versus Lopez for a full title instead of an interim title, and likely for more money up front than whatever you got fighting Gervonta and whatever you just got fighting Isaac Cruz. Remember that Lamont Roach goes into the Gervonta Davis fight and he doesn't have any of the stock that he now has. He was basically just a B-side, and they likely paid him what you pay a B-side. I don't imagine that Lamont Roach made very much from that Gervonta Davis fight. And when it comes to Isaac, well, he likely only got as good as the pay-per-view sold. That's what you're relying on, after all. You're relying on the upside of the pay-per-view, if there even is one, to make the bulk of the cash. There's bigger money to make. You likely make more boxing the winner of Shakur versus Teofimo, that I anticipate will be Shakur. You're both at the same weight. Once again, I think it's a fight that Shakur would be willing to take. What about your previous statement about Lamont Roach returning to the lightweight division, that might be a more hospitable division for him? I maintain that position. He can do that. It's an option because Lamont Roach is not really a big guy, and this past weekend, he didn't face a bona fide 140-pounder with a 140-pounder's frame. If he were to theoretically return to the lightweight division now, he would easily be the biggest name there, not counting Gervonta Davis, who I don't expect to come back to that weight anyway. So compared to the guys that are there, Abdullah Mason, Andy Cruz, Floyd Schofield, Roach would be the A-side to those fighters. Returning to the lightweight division is something that he can explore, but he can also explore fighting the winner of Stevenson versus Lopez, and that's the beauty of it. It's the options that even though Lamont is coming off his second consecutive draw, he's still in a good position, a strong position, and thus, I agree with Paulie. Lamont Roach's stock is on the up and up. He didn't win the fight on paper, didn't win the fights, but he's in a good place.
Terrence Bud Crawford was stripped of his championship belt by a sanctioning organization because he didn't pay an exorbitant fee to the sanctioning organization. Are you aware of that? And so there are pretty big problems with what goes on today.
The rift between Terence Crawford and the World Boxing Council has made it all the way to Congress. U.S. Congressman Randy Fine, to be exact, who described the WBC's alleged extortion as one of the big problems the sport faces today. A problem that TKO, as a registered UBO, attempts to remedy by not working with those same sanctioning bodies and providing a more insulated infrastructure that would prevent from such dubious practices. Even though some believe that just the existence of a UBO, that sort of infrastructure, is dubious in it of itself, it's sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of deal. People are so worried about what fighters Dana White is going to screw over with no oversight over the fighters that are already getting screwed over, that have been already getting screwed over, not just by the managers and the promoters, but by the goddamn sanctioning bodies themselves, as if everything in boxing is so hunky-dory and so perfect. God forbid anybody step in and try to do things differently, try to lobby for some sort of change, some sort of an alternative. And I say it all the time. Boxing had all its own problems before TKO was even a thing. And if it never even forms, if legislature doesn't even pass to allow its existence, those same problems that predate its inception will still be there afterwards. They're still there now. The WBC is just one example, though a glaring one.
I've zero sympathy for Maurizio Sullivan and the WBC. I'm in full support of what Terence Crawford's doing. I think sanctioning bodies, for me, they're money-making schemes. If the WBC played along with their own rules all the time, I would probably sit here and have a different opinion, but they don't. They make things up as they go along. For example, the Conor Benn scenario, right? He failed a drug test as per the clean boxing program, which is run by the WBC. The WBC provide Ben with an alternative reason to the one that he gave them, because the one that he gave, if it is true, would open up the WBC to litigation of every single fighter that has ever failed a test and served the ban under the clean boxing program. Conor Benn told them that there was a flaw in the testing process. They said that that's nonsense, so therefore they provided him the excuse of eating too many eggs. Conor Benn never came up with that excuse. That was a WBC reasoning. Also, we've seen this week alone, the WBC 140-pound champion, Subriel Matias. He's failed a drug test. Instead of cancelling an upcoming fight with Dalton Smith, which is coming up in January, he's been allowed to continue. This is an important part of this story. In 2019, a 28-year-old fighter called Maxime Dadyshev died as a result of injuries sustained in a fight with Subriel Matias. This should be investigated massively off the back of the news of him failing a drug test in recent times. Remember Dillian Whyte? 1,000 days as the WBC #1, not mandated as the challenger. Manny Pacquiao out for 4 years, called straight back in to be the challenger for the WBC world title against Mario Barrios. Listen, if they upheld their rules all the time, I would have sympathy for them, but they don't. So if they're not going to uphold the rules, why should Terence Crawford?
Why indeed. What does it profit him to fork over $300,000 of his dollars to the World Boxing Council for a belt that he was probably going to drop anyway? We're supposed to feel sorry for the WBC in this situation? We're supposed to look at them and say that they were done wrong? How many fighters have they done wrong? Here you have Ryan Garcia, who's literally coming right off a loss for fighting for another belt with another organization, and what does the WBC do? They give him a title shot for their belt, after giving Manny one who hadn't fought in something like 4 years? Conor Benn has not campaigned as a welterweight in about 3, and for that, they rank him at number 1, the number 1 welterweight per the WBC. Their rules don't make sense. They don't make sense. For all of the fighters that they left in limbo, fighters that they screwed over like Dillian Whyte, who Catterall mentioned, but also Kenya Enriquez at more than 1 weight. For all of the fighters that they've deprioritized, all of the fighters that they've done wrong, to see them done wrong by someone as high profile as Terence Crawford, I see that and I see Providence. I see Kismet. I see karma. Maybe you see something else. I think that Eddie Hearn does. I think I saw him arguing in the WBC's defense.
What he did is a little bit like going out to a restaurant, having all the best caviar and lobsters, and the bill comes and you go, I ain't paying that, and you just walk out. Now, you sat down at the table, you wanted to eat all the good stuff, you got to pay your dues and you got to pay your bill. Now, what he will say in answer to that is, yeah, but the bill's too much. It's like, no, the rules are their rules. But Terence is looking at it going, well, it's 300,000. But it doesn't. You wanted the opportunity to call yourself an undisputed champion, right? And the only reason you can do that, the only way you can do it, is to fight for the WBC world title. So if belts don't matter, then surely undisputed doesn't matter to you. For me, if you want to fight for the undisputed championship, you have to abide by the rules of that belt. But this is the era of the new wave of boxing coming in is going to try and all the belts.
Maybe they need to be fucked. At least the WBC. I mean, that's an appeal to the rules. An appeal to what the rules are. That, well, Terence wanted to be undisputed, so he has to play by the rules, where the World Boxing Council either bends the rules or breaks the rules or makes the rules at their leisure. So how effective is an appeal to authority and an appeal to what the rules are when we all know the WBC augments the rules as they wish, and many times fighters are powerless to stop them. Fighters that, well, they don't have the juice of a Terence Crawford. Consider that it's part of the rules to fight in the fights and fight in the eliminators and climb up the ranks so that eventually you get to fight for a title. Eventually. I've seen the World Boxing Council break that rule at their leisure all the time and leave several fighters in limbo, not for weeks, not for months, for years, all while depriving them of the opportunity they're supposed to have earned based on the rules. Thus, the rules themselves are not an effective anchor to absolve the World Boxing Council of criticism when they bend and break the rules all the time. And when they can't do that, they simply make them up as they go along. To me, this is karma. To me, Terence is an avenging angel in this situation. It's easy to compartmentalize it and limit the conversation and the perspective to just what's going on with Terence in the World Boxing Council, that Terence is doing them wrong. But how many fighters for how many years have they done wrong? Fighters who were powerless to do anything about it. So that if Terence is giving them a taste of their own medicine, of course I don't feel sorry for them. I think they need somebody to keep them in check. I think that they need something to worry about because Mauricio has it in his head that he's a lot more important than he actually is. Seems less and less like the president of an alphabet organization and more like a guy who's trying to be a promoter. Terence fucked them, right? But how many people have they fucked? That's my purview of it. So now you know what it feels like to be fucked over and not be able to do anything about it.